We're going on an amazing adventure, riding the rails through the Canadian Rockies, revealing breathtaking landscapes.
This is our office. If I ever grow tired of this scenery, I have bigger problems than being tired of the scenery.
We'll enter a wilderness inhabited by magnificent beasts and discover one of the world's most treacherous waterways.
Hell's Gate's just around the corner. The water gets pretty turbulent.
In landscapes formed millions of years ago, giving up secrets of our past.
Some of the weird wonders apparently inspired some of the weird wonders from Star Wars.
We'll meet the people who live and work along this special railway.
Sometimes bears are startled by trains and they run straight down the tracks.
With hidden treasure for the taking.
Oh, there we go. There's a big piece.
This is no ordinary railway journey. This is one of the most scenic railway journeys in the world, Canada. Vancouver, British Columbia. A natural seaport, historically it was a vital trade link to the east and became a starting point for the Canadian Pacific Transcontinental Railway in 1887. Now, it's the beginning of our great escape on the Rocky Mountaineer. This enormous 80-ton train is powered by two 3,000 horsepower GP40-2 engines. Carrying up to 590 guests, it's the only passenger train running right across the Rockies on the Canadian Pacific Line. We begin in Vancouver Station, manned with top-notch staff eager to create an unforgettable trip. And as an extra treat, the men in kilts have come out to pipe them off.
You did fantastic. You did great. Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, Jeff.
The 600-mile-long journey on this specially designed viewing train follows in the footsteps of the 19th century pioneers who battled through the uncharted Canadian Rockies. On board, seasoned hosts Pete and Jocelyn are ready to fulfill the passengers' every need. Pete was working as a cocktail waiter in his hometown of Birmingham before making the jump into the Canadian wilderness.
Some people are very into the flora, some people are all about the history. I've found out that I'm a bit of a geology geek and that I'm a bit of a salmon geek.
We're ready for lunch, busiest time of the day. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Rocky Mountaineer. Hello, how are you? Good, good, excellent. So my name is Jocelyn, my wonderful partner here, making you some drinks right now. This is Pete. So we will be with you for the journey into the Canadian Rockies. So we're going to be passing out. It's a wonderful Rocky Mountaineer tradition. That is the sunrise toast, a peach bubbly. Why not?
Let's raise a glass and a toast to good afternoon, welcome aboard, and cheers.
Cheers!
Glass in hand, the wild journey begins. Starting in Vancouver, our trip sees us visit the turbulent water of Hell's Gate, pan for gold on the Fraser River, before stopping in the interior at Kamloops. The next leg continues eastward. We'll set foot on Kiewa Glacier get up close and personal with the wildlife before arriving at our jaw-dropping final stop, the awe-inspiring mountain destination of Banff in Alberta. Every mile of track has a story to tell. The route starts by following the Fraser River, named after intrepid explorer Simon Fraser. 200 years ago, he and his crew took on a treacherous journey across the Rockies in search of new trade routes. After surviving this, one of the most dangerous stretches of water on the river, he named it Hell's Gate.
This, of course, as you may have heard, is the narrowest point in the Fraser River, just 31 meters across. And its current depth is about 150 feet deep. And because it's so deep, there's an enormous volume of water passing through it. It's the equivalent of a volume of water the size of the Empire State Building going through Hell's Gate every minute, twice. It's one of those rapids that really divides the fine line between bravery and stupidity. As it is such a turbulent rapid, Simon Fraser eloquently put in his journal that they'd endured so much, but for surely we have entered the gates of hell.
Today, it takes expert navigational skills, jet engines, and guts to get anywhere near. Adventurous tour guides Renee and Jesse may be up for the challenge, but they also know the risks.
Hell's Gate's just around the corner, but a lot of debris in the water.
There's a lot of sticks and stuff in the water.
If we lose the pump, we won't be making it down very easy. Yeah, if you guys are good, we'll turn around here. The water gets pretty turbulent and whirlpooly. You get sucked into the whirlpool sideways, and it can be pretty dangerous.
When you get in there, it's essentially a giant eddy full of whirlpools,
The water
full of
doesn't
boils.
run in one direction. It's always spinning, going opposite directions.
Yeah.
Causes the hazard.
It's not the best idea to be going into that eddy today.
And it's not just a nightmare for boats. Hell's Gate has always been a challenge for salmon, migrating up the river to breed. The arrival of the railway made things even worse.
When they were building the rail line, one of the workers put a little too much dynamite to do some blasting and actually caused a massive rock slide where a large chunk of the canyon walls fell into the river, essentially almost blocking off the river. The water naturally pushed its way through, but it created this giant turbulent rapid, and it caused a ton of problems for the spawning salmon. So when you get to Hell's Gate, there's a series of concrete man-made fish ladders, and essentially all they do is slow the water down, and it allows the fish an easier way around the rapid.
They may have stemmed the flow to some extent, but Hell's Gate still had an horrific reputation, and the 19th century railway builders had to somehow find a way to get a rather oddly named ship through this deadly stretch.
There was a paddle wheeler that they had come up here. It was called the SS Scuzzy.
Navigating the SS Scuzzy through Hell's Gate was certainly a difficult job.
They had Chinese workers in between 50 and 100 on each side of the banks with big ropes, and they attached them to the paddle wheeler, and basically were told, heave ho, and they had to pull this paddle wheeler up through the rapid. You know, a bunch of guys fall in, they grab the next 5 guys, get on that rope, pull it through. And when you go to Hell's Gate, you can still see the metal bolts, the rings in the rock, where they lined those ropes through and pulled that boat through.
The Scuzzy made it to the other side. Back on the Rocky Mountaineer, it's lunchtime. Executive chef Daniel Steerhoff has created a unique menu for the journey.
Produce and proteins are sourced from along our route. We get some of our beef from Alberta, so we get that beautiful AAA Canadian beef.
But cooking on a train is slightly tricky.
It truly is a unique experience. I've worked in kitchens actually much smaller that aren't moving, but this is the creme de la creme, and definitely top-notch when it comes to working on trains.
Food's been terrific, and so for service.
I didn't know we'd be fed so much food.
As the Gold Star service continues, our train heads north up the Fraser River. Just below the tracks, modern-day explorers head out in search of the real thing.
Okay, let's get to it and see if we can find some gold.
Our voyage through the Canadian Rockies whisks us past some breathtaking scenery. And 4 hours out of Vancouver, keeping things rolling on the train can be pretty challenging.
All right, coming up next, then you got 2 beef and 1 chicken.
Our ex-Brummie, Pete, has been a host for 4 seasons now. It's been quite a journey from the West Midlands to Canada's most western state, something of a love affair, in fact.
Like many great travel stories, initially there was a girl involved, but I was never quite done. 3 months became 6, became a year. I didn't see myself necessarily staying here forever, but I didn't see myself leaving anytime soon. And then I would find myself returning to England, and I would actually miss the mountains, and I would miss the ocean, and I would miss British Columbia.
We're now 156 miles north of Vancouver, and the landscape offers more than just incredible views. This is also a busy route for freight.
And there's the trains.
It's steeped in history, with some treasures hidden just off the track.
We are off to one of my favorite claims on the Fraser River.
Modern-day prospector Dan Hurd not only looks the part, but knows all about the gold here.
I've nicknamed this claim Pickerton just because of all the gold pickers that we found. Gold pickers are gold flakes that are big enough that you can pick up by hand. If we're lucky, we will find some bigger gold.
Sometimes, Dan finds a bit more than he bargained for.
About a week ago, I was here, and as I was panning down on the far side of the river, a black bear walked by. I've had some bears a little uncomfortably close at times, but I've lived my whole life out in the forest like this. I have never had an encounter that has worried me. You know, we're just minutes away from the claim up the hill here, and we see the tracks going by right there. And those tracks are old. They've been here since, well, the gold rush days.
A nugget's throw from the tracks, Dan finds his zen.
This is my little piece of paradise. Be very careful on this shale, it's razor-sharp rocks. I do know this spot right below us has produced well in the past, so I think that's where I'm going to try to start today. Okay, let's get to it and see if we can find some gold. The gold forms in bedrock from hot water bubbling up from below. It dissolves a bit of the gold and then deposits it in quartz seams. And then over time, the bedrock erodes and break up the quartz seams and free up the gold into the rivers. And that's a full pan. Find a spot to sit down and work it. So if there's any gold in the pan right now, it'll have sunk down through all the gravels and it'll be sitting on the bottom of the pan. And then I can slowly wash away the top stuff. The light stuff has no gold in it. And get pretty quick at doing one of these pans. I think this has only been, not even a minute so far, and I'm almost down. Aha, there we go. There's one of the nice pieces of gold we can find on the Fraser River. That's probably 0.1 of a gram-ish. And that would be worth, $5 to $10, that piece of gold.
Dan's treasure may be modest, but it connects him to the very beginning of gold mining in the Rockies.
Right here where we're sitting, the Fraser Canyon is the site of the very first gold rush here in Canada, and it was a big one. Someone let it slip down in California that there was gold in Fraser's River. And one person told another, that person told 10 more, those 10 told 100 more, and all of a sudden there were 30,000 people heading up the Fraser River to find gold.
And the holler of gold can still cause a rush to the head.
Those things still happen today. We call them staking rushes or staking frenzies, but I've even started a few myself. Everyone loves the thrill of the treasure hunt. I will never get rid of this claim. This is mine forever because I love it so much.
With enough treasure to buy a round of coffees, a happy Dan heads off for a bit of train spotting.
This is one of my favorite spots to view the trains from, this little secret lookout here. The scenery for the trains is amazing, seeing the two Cisco bridges crossing over. and just beautiful. It's so neat to see. So I like bringing people here to see these bridges.
Our train heads over the smaller Cisco Bridge on the Canadian Pacific Line, which stretches 160 meters across the Fraser River. Incredibly, the original span was built and shipped all the way from England in 1883. The current bridge, now 110 years old, is one of Canada's most iconic structures. The construction of this coast-to-coast railway line was arguably Canada's greatest feat of engineering. It also must have been quite a sweat to build. Tackling 8,000-foot mountains and steep river rapids, it took thousands of men to create.
You can see in the distance that the forest is really thinning out, and the peaks in the distance is becoming that semi-arid desert. A very, very dry, very arid area. And this town that we're just coming into town, which is the town of Lytton, it has record temperatures of about 44 degrees Celsius.
In the town of Lytton is a tiny museum dedicated to the railway workers. Local resident and history enthusiast Lorna has found a way to remember that it wasn't just the Canadians who built this mountain railway. There's a dark side to this railroad's history. To have a big enough workforce, they controversially imported thousands of Chinese workers.
In 1978, my husband and I actually purchased this lot. We were told that there was a Chinese Joss house or temple on the lot. Most local people didn't know about that building. So we started researching. Then 4 years ago, I decided I'll just go ahead and create this museum. The idea is to give awareness to people, not only their hardships, but the Chinese contributions to our province. Many people remained out of necessity and started restaurants, laundries, and merchant stores. So that's my goal here, to get people thinking about that.
In 1879, American contractor Andrew Onderdonk won the contract to build a substantial section of the line, a total of 227 miles. To complete the railway through the mountainous and hostile terrain, his search for labor was forced to go global.
People wanted to come, make their fortune, and go back to China.
But their arrival was far from welcomed.
There was definitely a negative response to hiring Chinese. There was this thought that they were taking jobs away from other people, but not so. They really were not. Most of them would have been just doing hard labor, pick and shovel jobs. Some people in explosives. They were blowing up rocks for tunnels. One Chinese person per mile died on the railway work. They were put into a position of danger that the non-Chinese workers were not. Their standard of living was less. And also, at the end of it, they were basically abandoned to make their own way within Canada. The Chinese importance in the construction of the railway is hugely understated.
They worked in harsh conditions for little pay. Historians believe around 600 of them died to make this route possible. As the track winds its way along the river, the extraordinary landscape shows the physical challenges the railroad builders faced on a daily basis.
Just across the water in a few moments, we're going to have our first glimpses of Rainbow Canyon. Rainbow Canyon is named because of the minerals that get exposed by the very steep fall line, reacting with the little bit of rain it gets, and showing very beautiful reds and blue colors. That is why it takes its name, Rainbow Canyon. But the rest of the area is called Avalanche Alley, and that's because the snow that does fall here, it builds up and it falls down on the tracks, and that's why it's a rather dangerous part of the journey. Not for us, the Canadian National does have various rock sheds that channel all the falling debris.
Safely through the perilous canyons, the Rocky Mountaineer is nearly at its halfway point at Kamloops. After 200 miles through Canada's most scenic rail highway, the train stops. Hosts and passengers disembark and head to their hotel, oblivious to what is about to happen in the wee small hours of the night. Out of the dusk appears the night shift, headed up by maintenance manager Mike Ryder, who's in charge of getting our train shipshape for the next day.
7's flagged. We'll do 5, 8, and 9 right away. Nothing else right now. Please have a safe night.
With only a few hours till its scheduled departure, the pressure's on.
We're going to clean the exterior. We're going to clean the interior. We're going to stock the train. We're going to provision it with food, with supplies, with drinks. We're also gonna repair the train. Any defects that may have come up throughout the day are gonna be addressed. My job is to ensure that those work orders are closed tonight.
Keeping this mammoth twin-engine train in perfect working order is where engineers Kevin Soprovich and Daryl Bleo step in.
We are jacking a coach because we have a spring that's dislodged on the other side, so it's hit a heavy bump and dislodged itself.
If the team don't fix the spring in time for the early morning departure, the passengers could be in for a bumpy ride.
You'll see where the spring has been dislodged here. So you see where it's popped over? It's not sitting properly in here. So it's going to cause this equalizer bar. So every time the wheel bounces, it's going to bounce sideways and not bounce properly up and down.
So we're just going to take the weight off, and it should give us enough clearance just to shimmy that back into place.
All right, going up.
At the other end of the coach, there's another issue. One of the buffer rods needed to hold the carriages in place so passengers can cross from one to the other safely has been damaged.
If you break one, and say you go on a curve, it'll push it back and it'll stay there if it's broken, right? So now you have a gap, which is unsafe, so.
They'll only have till daybreak to fix it. By dawn, the train will be as good as new. Ready to hit the most extraordinary part of this unique railway journey through not just one national park, but 3. We're in Kamloops, a major road, river, and rail junction in the center of the Rockies. It's halfway to our final destination, Banff in Alberta. The repaired and restocked Rocky Mountaineer now embarks on a 400-mile voyage full of majestic glaciers and snowy peaks along the Thompson River. We might only be going at 35 miles an hour, but that simply prolongs the pleasure of seeing these Rocky Mountains. Several are over 12,000 feet high. Refreshed after their pit stop, Jocelyn and Pete are back to multi-skilling.
Well, we're a host, but we are a bartender, we're a psychiatrist, we're a party pumper, historian.
And if you keep everybody smiling, whether it be story, whether it be like just interaction, then that's what we do. I consider myself a provider of nice times.
Our train journey is about to take a turn to a much colder, higher region as the line heads north.
And you can see that the environment has changed drastically. We quickly leave that semi-arid desert, and that's because we're starting to go back into that mountainous region. So we're going to start to see the southern part of the Monashee Range, which is a sub-range of the Columbia.
Rather incredibly, we're at about 1,100 feet above sea level now, but we're going to take our guests another 4,500 feet before we reach our highest point of when we'll be in the Rocky Mountains.
The Rockies might stand tall and proud above our rail route, but they are not invincible. The famous glaciers above are shrinking fast. Glaciologists Brian and Ben are switching from rail to rotor to investigate.
Okay, here we go. We're heading back to the Kiowa Glacier. It's one of the largest glaciers in this area. The Kiowa Glacier is terminating into a large lake. And that lake is increasing in area as the glacier retreats backwards.
Despite being far from any city, the effects of global warming are still hitting the area hard. It is predicted that 80% of the ice cover in the Rocky Mountains will be gone in the next 50 years.
This glacier is really falling apart this last year. This toe broke off big time, as you can see from all those icebergs. And then if you look along the side of the glacier, there's all these collapsed old ice caves and things like that. All these collapses are a bad sign for this glacier. It's pretty spectacular.
Scientists like Ben and Brian are trying to understand their retreat, which is by no means risk-free.
If the weather comes in, do you want us to be anticipating you coming back? Yeah, absolutely. There. If it looks like it's going to turn there, I'm going to come back for you guys.
To measure the retreat of this 7-kilometer-long glacier, they have to work on ice at an altitude of 7,000 feet. making the job physically exhausting.
So here we're just drilling a hole in the glacier. Down at this elevation of the glacier, we experience a lot of melt, so we need to drill this hole pretty deep. And we do this at September or August each year. And then when we come back the following September, this pole will be sticking out of the glacier.
The lower parts of the glacier here will naturally lose a lot of ice in a given season. You might find 6 to 7 meters of ice melt during the summer. And then in the wintertime, due to ice dynamics, that ice is replenished from higher up the glacier. But what's been happening is that that replenishment is not keeping up with the amount of melt at the lower part of the glacier.
At times, they've found that the ice has dropped by 1 meter in height in just 2 weeks. The dark line of the valley walls indicates just how high the glacier used to be. More worryingly, without the supporting ice, the walls become prone to collapse.
If you look carefully here, you can actually see a whole series of trees that we often refer to as a drunken forest. So the trees are sort of lopped around and flopped around like they've had a long night at the pub, I guess. This is a key indicator of unstable terrain. The glacier has retreated several kilometers from its outermost moraine. What's clear is the more recent retreat we can attribute to human activity, greenhouse gas emissions.
No one wants to see the national parks lose their majestic snowy peaks, least of all, those admiring them from on board our train. 2 hours into the second day, the landscape may change, but the hospitality remains unstoppable.
Well, I believe that we still have some hungry guests, and even if they're not hungry, we're going to overindulge.
We don't like guests to go more than an hour without...
An hour? I think it feels like 45 minutes. We're pretty relentless in the feeding. We often like to, at least like to put people's nerves at ease by saying there are no calories on the train, but it's certainly a land of indulgence.
And, like the food, the historical sites just keep on coming.
This is the site of Craigellachie, and what that is, it's the site of the last spike. Every single rail tie that gets put underneath the rails, and on top of the ballast with the rails on top, all of those get held in place with a spike, a single iron spike, and it's here that the very last spike was banged in, completing effectively what was the Trans-Canadian Railroad.
On the 7th of November 1885 at 9:22 in the morning, railroad financier Donald Smith drove in the ceremonial final spike, marking the end of all the engineering challenges, money crises, and natural disasters to hit the construction. At last, the nation's railroads ran the breadth of the country.
We can see this cairn as well, which commemorates the site of the last spike. And what's interesting about that is that there's a rock from each of the provinces of Canada and the 3 territories too, and that symbolizes a unity of the country.
This railway route is probably the only rail journey in the world that goes through 3 national parks: Glacier, Yoho, and Banff, each one with its own unique story. Just above our train route at Kicking Horse in Yoho National Park, most days, Parks Canada guide Claudia can be found trekking. Today, she's making her way up to one of the most famous sites in the world. That's if you're either a Star Wars obsessive or have an interest in the early origins of humankind.
We're on our way up to one of Yoho National Park's iconic Burgess Shale sites. Mount Stephen. Then it really starts to get steep. The discovery of this particular site is closely tied in with the building of the Canadian Pacific Railway. It brought a lot of workers in who probably were scouring these hills hoping to find some gold, and instead they found stone bugs.
These weren't just any old bugs. They were early marine invertebrates dating back 540 million years to the Cambrian period. This was an exciting new discovery for scientists.
The community that lived here was in a warm tropical ocean, and was much like a modern-day reef community. And then these big mud flows would come and cover up the communities, and layer after layer was laid down and compressed, and then over millions of years transformed into rock and then pushed up into what we now see as the Canadian Rockies.
What's extraordinary at this Burgess Shale site is that it revealed incredible detail in some of the soft-bodied fossils. Advanced imaging revealed hearts, livers, and eggs, all previously unseen. The exquisite preservation then exposed something amazing: the first ever record of skeletal remains.
We can find our distant ancestors here at the Burgess Shale. We have our very first chordates, so that's the group that we belong to. And these animals are much more basic than we are, but they have a notochord, which is the precursor to a backbone. This is an ancestor to fish and anything with a backbone, like us.
Our long-lost relatives from 550 million years ago. Now, these ancient creatures have become Hollywood stars, inspiring the world of film.
Some of the weird wonders apparently inspired some of the weird wonders from Star Wars. Have you ever seen the original where they have the bar scene from Tatooine? Apparently those aliens were inspired by creatures from the Burgess Shale.
As a relatively recent discovery, these rocks undoubtedly have many hidden wonders yet to be found.
I always tell people when we come up here that they could be the first person to find something brand new that no one else has ever seen.
The Burgess Shale is extraordinary. This UNESCO World Heritage Site attracts scientists all year round to catch a tantalizing glimpse of life over 500 million years ago. Without the railway builders, it might never have been found. Now, the train is heading into its home stretch. But there's still some food on the horizon.
Company's good.
Good. It's great to be able to mix and meet people from other walks of life.
I love looking after the Australians. They're always so happy about everything, and everything is beautiful. As a fairly standard, it doesn't matter what it is, everything's beautiful.
Next, we're heading into bear country. Half of the grizzly bear population of Canada lives in British Columbia. Spotting a wild bear may be a thrill from the safety of a train. On foot, only a cool professional ranger would actually like to meet one. Ranger Jesse is on a mission.
We're headed to a place called the 5 Mile Pullout, and it's a spot that's where we've had quite a few grizzly bears struck and killed along the railroad tracks. And it's an interesting area because it's the confluence of the railway, the Bow River, the Trans-Canada Highway, and the Bow Valley Parkway. And the whole area is constrained by our steep Rocky Mountains, so it's a challenging spot for wildlife to get to.
Bears don't comprehend the real dangers of the rails, but see them as a way to travel quickly and find grain dropped by freight trains.
Over the last 10 years, we've lost 6 grizzly bears to mortality on the railroad tracks, and one of the hot spots for grizzly bear mortality has been along these curves. Sometimes bears are startled by trains, and when they're startled, they run, and they kind of lose their sense of reasoning, and they run where they can run fastest, which is straight down the tracks. This is one of those areas where we have created some alternate travel routes on the other side of the Bow River so that the wildlife don't even have to travel along the railway.
Grizzly bears are under threat from trains and loss of habitat. These iconic animals are now protected and monitored in the hope their numbers recover.
These trains take kilometers to stop, so their best thing they can do is just honk their horn. But if it's a last-minute sighting, then it's very challenging for them.
Other animals are also following the railroad.
A lot of elk congregate around the town of Banff, and that's where they have their calves. So often this time of year, grizzly bears and wolves and cougars converge on the town of Banff as they're trying to get some of these elk calves when they're first born.
Using tracking, Jesse has a pretty good idea of the bear population in his charge.
There's, roughly 65 adult grizzly bears in Banff National Park, and probably 20 of them use the Bow Valley and encounter the railway. My job is trying to figure out how we can provide excellent opportunities for people coming to Banff so they have a meaningful experience, but at the same time minimizing the effects we're having on wildlife.
As we travel through Yoho National Park, it's hard to comprehend there are so few bears left in the area. All are being carefully monitored. 16 of them are female, and they hold the future of these beautiful grizzlies in British Columbia. Not far down the line, still in Yoho, the railroad builders faced a very different challenge. A place known as the Big Hill.
People were still driving on dirt roads. People were still driving horse carriages. So something like this was a massive feat.
We've traveled almost 500 miles across the Canadian Rockies, and our spellbinding two-day rail adventure is nearly over. Life wasn't so plain sailing for the crew building a line with so many challenges. The worst stretch of all was known as the Big Hill. It had an incredibly steep slope, dropping 1,000 feet in just 10 miles.
The Big Hill was in many ways a cut corner. That money was conserved by putting the trains down what was an illegal grade, 4.4% grade. It would be a rather dangerous situation to have all that momentum heading down the hill. And the first train that ever went down the Big Hill did actually derail. And the engineers on board didn't make it either.
When it opened in 1884, the Big Hill section was one of the steepest railway lines around. It was the scene of many disastrous derailments, as Park Ranger Sarah explains.
Canadian Pacific Railway lost steam trains. They would also lose loads. They would lose grain, transportation, sometimes the loss of life, whether it was conductor or passenger. They realized that just running straight over and straight down into a valley with no reprieve, there's no way to slow thousands of tons. They needed to come up with a solution, and that solution was the spiral tunnels.
They decided to cut 2 circular tunnels deep into the side of 2 mountains, Cathedral Mountain and Mount Ogden. This would allow trains to spiral round and descend safely at a much more gentle grade.
Basically, the way they engineered, they did bring in Swiss engineers from Europe, based on the same way that they built roads to ascend as switchbacks through the Alps. To build this, 1,000 men, horses, dynamite, remove all the rubble, and then lay the track once it's cleared.
On the 1st of September 1909, this pair of spiral tunnels opened at a cost of around $1.5 million. The extra track effectively doubled the length of the section, reducing the steepness of the gradient by half.
At the time, it was pretty cutting edge. People were still driving on dirt roads. People were still driving horse carriages. The Ford T model engine was basically a sort of, a new phenomenon. So something like this was a massive feat. Right now, there's a CP rail train that's coming into the upper tunnel. It's going into the mountain. It's going to be coming around, spiraling upon itself lower, and then coming out right there in the lower part. And as it's turning back on itself, it's going to descend. So that makes it a whole lot safer, a whole lot slower.
And what better way to see this feat of engineering than by taking a train right through them? But this time, we are going up rather than down.
Now, what's going to happen is that we are going to head towards Mount Ogden. And as we get closer to it, you'll see that about 50 feet above the tunnel that we go into, you'll actually see the tracks that we'll be on. Because to quote my mother, what we'll be doing is chucking a Yui inside of the mountain. So you see, by looking at the rail car in front of us, you can probably see and probably imagine which way the train is going to turn. And we're just seeing, quite literally, the light at the end of the tunnel But Cathedral Mountain was on our right-hand side, Mount Stephen was directly behind us, and as we emerge from this tunnel, you'll see that Cathedral Mountain is actually directly in front of us. And so rather incredibly, this train has performed a three-quarter turn.
The train has now traveled for 2 days as it enters the final stretch in Banff National Park. This place covers over 2,500 square miles of some of the world's most majestic mountains. It's also famous for what lies beneath. Just a few meters to the east of the line, hidden in the limestone rock, are some thermal springs. Deep in these famous cave systems, guide Amar is taking us into the area's history.
Banff National Park was created around natural springs. So here we have one of them. Altogether we have 9 springs. In the late 1800s, when the railway was being built across the country, winter was coming, work would stop. Most men would go back east to their families, but 3 railway workers decided they were going to spend their time in the valley here. So they started exploring, and they discovered these springs. So what did they do? They had their first bath in a long, long time.
The railway company spotted a financial opportunity.
As they were having their bath, they quickly realized others would love to have that same experience, and perhaps this was their chance to make their fortune.
In 1885, keen to make the most of the springs, the government opened up Canada's first national park around the site. It attracted wealth and tourism to the region. The iconic Banff Springs Hotel followed shortly afterwards, and the area still thrives today with over 4 million people visiting every year. After 600 miles of luxurious train trekking across the Rocky Mountains, we pull in to Banff Station.
Welcome to Banff, everybody. And what a pleasure it's been. Thank you so much.
Pleasure was taking care.
Really.
Thanks a lot.
And thank
That's
you.
great.
Good.
Thank you. Good to see you.
And welcome to Banff, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you.
Enjoyed
Yes.
being with you guys.
Pleasure looking after you.
It's a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleasure looking after you. You have a great time, man.
It's been a fantastic experience, and the magnificent views are truly world-class. Our railway voyage has shown us some deadly waterways. We've crossed stunning bridges, through beautiful national parks while taking in some incredible feats of engineering. But for Pete and Jocelyn, this isn't the end of the line. Their Rocky Mountain rail journey doesn't stop here.
And so that's a real privilege, and we get to do it all again tomorrow.